Ukraine will finally receive a $61 billion US military aid package. It's taken 6 months to make it through Congress, but even with that cash injection, how long can Ukraine defend itself against advancing Russian forces? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, money for the war effort couldn't come soon enough for people in Ukraine. It's been a long winter and there have been setbacks. So, what will this US aid package mean for the fighting on the ground? How will Russia respond? And where does it leave Europe?
Desperately needed funds for Ukraine, now law. Nearly $61 billion finally passed after it was attached to support for Israel and Taiwan. Despite a 6-month delay, help is on the way.
I'm making sure the shipments start right away. In the next few hours, literally a few hours, we're going to begin sending in equipment to Ukraine for air defense munitions, for artillery, for rocket systems, and armored vehicles. You know, this package is literally an investment, not only in Ukraine's security, but in Europe's security, in our own security.
Though Russia says US aid money won't make a difference.
Of course, this allocated funds and the weapons to be delivered for this money will not lead to change in this dynamic. They will lead to new victims among Ukrainians. More Ukrainians will be dying. Ukraine will suffer more losses.
For Ukraine, support can't come soon enough.
Now we will do everything to make up for half a year spent in debates and doubts. What the Russian occupier was able to do during this time, what Putin is now planning, we must turn against him.
But that may be easier said than done. Ukrainian stockpiles are running desperately low. The country is in dire need of air defense missiles and munitions. Ukrainian soldiers have taken to rationing 2,000 shells a day, compared with 10,000 on the Russian side. Russia's war economy is outpacing the West, producing 3 million artillery munitions a year, compared with 1.2 million made by the US and Europe combined.
We have the biggest fight in a generation, and the need of our defence forces is much higher than the output capacity of the free world combined.
Russian troops are making advances. Despite President Zelensky's strong words, Ukrainian military leaders are warning that even with American money, they'll only be holding the line, not taking back territory. As the war gets into its 3rd year, how much political will remains from Ukraine's allies? Perhaps more importantly, if Ukraine is not successful, will other European countries need their own military stockpiles?
Let's meet our guests. Joining us from London is Chris Weafer. He is founding partner of Macro Advisory. That's an independent strategic business consultancy focused on Eurasia. In Moscow, we have Evgeny Popov. He's a member of parliament for the pro-Putin United Russia Party. And here with me in the studio is Dr. Martin Smith. He's senior lecturer in defence and international affairs at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to Roundtable to all of you. Martin, to you first of all, the Ukraine bill, let's be frank here, many lives could have been saved if this had been implemented earlier. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it's fair to say that certainly some lives could have been saved, particularly in terms of the air defence component, which Ukraine has been increasingly aware as being one of its key deficiencies over the last, well, so really since the start of the winter and the renewed Russian campaign against civilian energy and other infrastructure. So I think that's a fair assessment. Of course, we don't know what would have happened had the US Congress passed this aid legislation 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago. And whatever, in any event, the war on both sides at the moment shows no sign of ending. So I think, come what may, unfortunately, a significant number of lives would have been lost in any event.
Chris, that's a good point, isn't it? I mean, what difference is this realistically going to make on the ground now for Ukraine?
Well, look, I guess the consensus is, which you agree with, is that it's going to allow Ukraine to bolster its defenses. It's probably going to slow the Russian advance that we can now see taking place, albeit on a slow basis. And I suppose ultimately what it does is it keeps this sort of stalemate type of situation for longer. It buys time. It's not, there's no sense that this package is going to turn the tide. It's going to allow Ukraine to build a new offensive, to attack the Russian lines. The general view is that this just kind of is enough to maintain some sort of stability in the current situation and just to drag it forward, but really nothing decisive.
Evgeny, what was the reaction in Russia to this huge aid bill for Ukraine? $61 billion. Is Russia worried?
Russia is winning this war, and of course, new U.S. package to Ukraine, $61 billion. It's a new and significant challenge for Russian forces and Russian government. But, you have no chance to win this war, whatever you will do next, because this money, this equipment, and maybe some instructors or military personnel, which you're going to, not you, but the West, going to deploy on Ukraine, will be destroyed. And of course, I don't think we will see significant changes on the battlefield, because our army are stronger, and we have more motivation. We have more weapon. We have great state.
But still, Evgeny, but still you haven't won. I mean, we're 2 years plus into this war that Vladimir Putin said would take a few days, special military operation. 2 years and still no victory.
I've never heard from Vladimir Putin about a few days or few weeks or few months. Of course, it's a huge problem and tragedy for our country. And we didn't begin this war. This war is continued for 9 years, almost 9 years. And we will finish this conflict. I don't know. If you want to negotiate us, try to do it. If you want to win us by force, you will never do that. Of course, it's a long time we are fighting with NATO countries, but we have no other choice, because it's a question of our security guarantees. We are defending our security, our people, our land.
Thanks, Evgeny. I just want to take a look at what's actually in the package. So the $61 billion US aid package to Ukraine, this is what it looks like. $20.5 billion will go towards European command operations, $15.8 billion on security assistance, $13.4 billion to actually replenish US stocks, $9.5 billion for what they're calling forgivable economic loans, and $900 million in general expenses. So how is this going to be used by the Ukrainians on the ground? I mean, do they get more weapons, more artillery? Ultimately, they're running out of people, aren't they?
They're running out of people, and that's nothing that any outsider with the best will in the world can remedy for them. That's something that the Ukrainian government is indeed trying to fix with the legislation that was recently passed by the Ukrainian parliament, lowering the mobilisation age from 27 to 25. And to answer your question, Enda, it's the bread in terms of Ukraine's requirements in terms of kit. It's the bread and butter dimensions. I think probably the single most important element is air defence, to bolster the existing air defence capabilities and to extend them from Kyiv and other major population centres to newly exposed cities such as Kharkiv, for example. It's the very basic as many 155mm artillery shells as the outside world can supply to begin to even up the imbalance, the yawning imbalance, the gap between what Russia's able to fire and what the Ukrainian military have been able to respond with over the last several months. And then the longer range missile capabilities, which, as we know, because the United States made a statement about this just a couple of days ago, are already, even before Congress passed this latest aid package, the Biden administration had already started to supply the ATACMS missiles, and Mr. Sunak a couple of days ago announced that the UK was going to supply more Storm Shadow missiles. So I think probably one thing all three of us can agree on is that the war is not going to be decisively won by one side or the other anytime soon. But what I believe in terms of the military value of this new equipment that's going to be channeled to Ukraine over the coming weeks and months, it enables Ukraine to develop its strategy of what it calls active defence. So it's not simply sitting and waiting to be attacked by Russian forces in Donbass and elsewhere and hoping for the best. It's now able to fire back and to prevent, hopefully, Russia making any significant strategic territorial gains in the east.
Well, Martin, you mentioned the British Prime Minister. Let's have a listen to Rishi Sunak and also the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz.
We can't expect Americans to pay any price, to take any burden, if we in Europe are not ourselves prepared to make those sacrifices and make those investments. And that's exactly what we are doing. I think Olaf, I talked about the Zeitenwende and the leadership he's shown. You've seen my announcement yesterday. I said we've historically been one of the people that's always met our 2% commitment. But it's important that we in Europe demonstrate that we are doing that in order, I think, to keep the US committed to NATO, and the weekend news was very welcome.
Germany and the UK are standing together at Ukraine's side. Our clear goal is to provide support so that Ukraine can stand its ground against Russian aggression. But it is also important that we, the NATO states, are not at war with Russia. The decision by the United States does not absolve us here in Europe from the task of further expanding our support for Ukraine so that the country can defend itself against aggression.
Chris, do you think this colossal amount of money will also go towards maybe plugging some holes in the economy for Ukraine?
Yes, we've already heard this from the Ukrainian finance minister and the prime minister, that they have struggled with budget financing this year while waiting for the aid. Obviously, there was a 50 billion euro package agreed by the European Union a little while back. But nevertheless, that's coming in stages over several years rather than in one lump sum. So Ukraine has been struggling to plug the budget. The deficit last year was 26% of GDP, and it will be, even with this additional aid, the budget deficit will still be about 20% of GDP this year. So the country's building up an enormous amount of debt, even with the forgivable loans and with the aid, the military aid that's not by way of repayable debt. The country's sovereign debt burden, which was only 50% at the end of 2021, is now rapidly heading towards 100%. So financially, Ukraine is in a bad shape, even with this additional money from Europe and the US. And when we eventually do get to a ceasefire and some cessation of the current conflict, Ukraine is going to have a very badly strained balance sheet and will need an enormous amount of financial restructuring and probably debt forgiveness in order to rebuild the economy and go forward. And that can only happen when the conflict ends. In the meantime, it's getting worse.
Evgeny, do you feel in Russia that there's a growing maybe fatigue or tiredness in Western nations in terms of constantly giving to Ukraine, and that plays into Russia's hand?
You mean Western nations? I can feel tiredness of Western nations because I'm here in Russia. It's a part of Eurasia. But I can tell you about my country, because nobody can say you that no, we're not tired. We are good. Of course, people are tired of this war. It's a long process, and many people are died already. But again, we have no other choice. If we discuss economy, I can tell you that IMF predicted to us 3.6 GDP growth this year. I think, and I'm sure, it will be more than 3.6. And yes, we have some kind of big inflation. It's more than 7%. But in the end of the year, we will see around 4% of inflation in our Russian economy. And you or some other experts have no doubt that we have a stable and strong economy, and we are ready to fight to the end of this war. We are ready to fight until we win.
For how long, Evgeny? How long were you prepared to keep going? How long?
Again, forever, because it's our security guarantees. You can see deeper than Ukraine-Russia conflict. It's not about Putin. It's not about some Russian minister like Shoigu. It's about our people and about our sovereignty and about our state, because for years, for decades, NATO moved their military infrastructure to our borders, closer and closer and closer. And now you are here, near my border, near my country, near my people. NATO, it's a direct threat for Russian people.
But some would say, Evgeny, some would say that was done because Russia's behavior led to NATO reacting in such a way.
20 years ago, or maybe 25 years ago. What did we do 20 years ago?
You invaded Georgia in 2008.
20 years ago, you never stopped to move NATO infrastructure to my borders. And in Georgia, you defend some crazy president, which was bombed civilians in Ossetia. That's it. And we didn't occupy Georgia, I can remind you, because we returned back, and our forces have returned to their bases in Ossetia. We've never occupied Tbilisi, but we could do this.
So, Evgeny, at what point this year or next year does everyone sit around the table and talk peace?
I'm sure my government, my presidents are ready to talk wherever the West wants. Tomorrow, next month, next week. But what should we discuss? We had Minsk agreement, which has been broken by Ukraine and France and Germany. We had Istanbul agreement, which has been broken by Boris Johnson and his satellites in Kyiv. We don't believe the West. And of course, we need some, strong politicians which will sign peace agreements between Russia and NATO countries. But again, we are ready to negotiate. And
thanks, Evgeny.
What should we discuss?
Thank you. Martin, what message does this Ukraine aid bill send to the rest of Europe when America is constantly pumping in resources? We're seeing some countries are playing their part, like Germany and the UK, to be fair. Others are not that quick in helping Ukraine.
Well, I think it's that the message that's sent, not so much by the aid package, but by the delay and all the politicking that's taken place around it in the United States, particularly in the Republican Party, sends, I think, a twofold message. Number one, the United States will step up and will continue to backstop the collective Western effort in support of Ukraine, but it doesn't expect to be taken for granted, and it expects an increasing number of European NATO allies to step up, both in terms of the immediate sense of gifting their own military material and equipment to Ukraine, as Mr. Sunak has done very recently, of course, for example, but also over the longer term, moving towards meeting or even exceeding NATO's 2% annual defence spending target. And the evidence, certainly in terms of the latter, would suggest that that effort is succeeding. So you now have a situation where over half, it's gone from, I think, 8 just 18 months or so ago, to now over half of NATO members are either hitting the 2% target or are actually exceeding it, including, of course, the United States. So I think that the message is a reassuring one in the sense that when push comes to shove, the United States is, as it always has been, it's the very linchpin of the collective Western and European defence effort. And when push comes to shove, both parties in Congress have sent a clear message. If you look at the size of the majorities in both the House and the Senate that eventually passed the legislation, that the US is aware of that special responsibility, if you like, and is still prepared to step up. But increasingly, and understandably, American politicians are asking questions and have expectations
that Europe will deliver.
That Europe will deliver its part, its fair share.
Chris, what did you make of Sunak's language the other day when he was in Poland, when he said that he was now putting the UK defence industry on a war footing? I mean, it was very interesting, his choice of words.
Yeah, look, I think we have to be realistic as well and understand that it is most unlikely, I mean, really unlikely, that Mr. Sunak will be Prime Minister at the end of this year. It would be an absolute miracle if that were to happen. So to some extent, therefore, and I think a lot of people I talk to really, I won't say go so far as say dismiss what he's saying, but they are putting it down to political posturing, and really it'll be up to the next government, likely a Labour government, then to decide what the UK policy will be. So to some extent, it's therefore kind of background noise at this stage. But going back to your question about the US bill, I think also the view that I hear a lot is that this money simply buys time for Ukraine to prevent a collapse until after we get through the US election. Because we've heard from Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov and others that Moscow really only sees the United States as the credible counterparty to discuss, the future and what happens next. And as Mr. Popov has said, obviously the Europeans have, reneged on, as they see it, reneged on Minsk, and then of course Boris Johnson's actions in Istanbul. So really it's very focused on the US, and the US can't do anything politically until after the election. That's clear. President Biden could not be seen to be engaged in any process before the election. It would undermine him. But after the election, we'll either have President Biden for his final term, or we'll have President Trump back for his final term, and who knows. But the general view is that the $61 billion was put in place to prevent Ukraine from collapsing between now and the end of the year. And this serious business of discussion about what to do to end this will only start after the US election, after the inauguration, from the beginning of next year. So the sense, therefore, is we have to sit it out until then.
Evgeny, I saw you laugh when we mentioned Rishi Sunak. How is he seen in Russia? How is he viewed?
I don't know how many people voted for Rishi Sunak as a prime minister, because as to me, 84,000 people voted for me to be a deputy in the parliament. I'm sure that Rishi Sunak got less votes than me. Of course, if we discuss Rishi Sunak, we can see 100% enemy for Russia. We don't have any difference between Rishi Sunak or Boris Johnson or Mr. Cameron as well. I can't see any difference between Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden, because the United States already paid to Ukraine, as I can count, around $200 billion. They sent to Ukraine on this war, and I don't know. Everybody should understand that the Western world can't do anything with Russia. And if you want to dictate us your rules, or if you want to change our regime, you will fail. You should negotiate Russia, understand Russia, and of course we will try to understand you in response.
Martin, thank you, and to Chris and Evgeny as well. Thank you all for your insight. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World, and if you like what you see there, please do hit that subscribe button. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.